a little bit longer than our normal. What's normal? It's a little bit longer than what we've done in the past, so I'm going to try to move quickly. Okay. Mitzvahs tefillah. Let me do a little bit of an intro before we jump in. Okay. As you see from the title, this is called Mitzvahs tefillah, the mitzvah of davening. And davening is hard. I mean, that's why it's called an avodah, right? Avodah means work. It's not a game, it's work. It's hard for adults. So how much more so, one would assume that it'll be hard for children. And therefore, it's hard work for parents and educators to, I don't want to use the word get children to daven, because that already doesn't give the right taste. But it's a big responsibility to introduce young people to the idea of davening. And how do we do it? How do we do it the right way? So the Rebbe is going to have some surprises for us, as always. All right. Die Mitzvah von Tefillah wird ausgelernt von Pasuk la'avde b'chol levavchem. The mitzvah of tefillah is learned out, meaning how do we know that there is an obligation to daven? We learned it out from a pasuk in this week's Sedra. Serve him with a full heart. Und zu dienen ihm mit dein ganzen Herzen. Wie der Chazal teachen, and our sages explain what does that mean. It's a Gemara in Tainus, the very beginning of Tainus. Ezui aveda shehi balev. What is this aveda which you use your heart for? Ve'emer zu tefillah. Say that this is davening. Davening is the aveda shebalev. Welcha aveda is in Herzen? Das is davening. Davening meint avedas Hashem. Avedas Hashem. Dienen dem Eibishten. Was durch dem, was Yid wird an Avid von Eibishten, wird behaften mit dem. Davening is serving. And serving here, the Rebbe is being very specific or very precise. The term serving, like a servant, like an Evid. So, sometimes we think of serving, we say the word serving, divine service, serving Hashem. We use the word so often, serve, 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 serve. Sometimes it loses meaning or it departs from its actual original meaning. The Rebbe is saying here, no, we mean serving like a servant, like an Evid. An Evid. Now, Evid's a scary word. Evid's an unpleasant word sometimes, or at least for many people it has unpleasant connotations. But we're not going to shy away from it. We're going to talk about being an Evid to Hashem. Und die Chazal sagen, als beim Davenen darf man sich wegstellen vor dem Eibishten, ge'avda kamei marei. Wie Knecht, was steht vor sein Adrein. Our sages say that when you daven, you have to stand there in front of Hashem like a servant stands in front of his master. What does it mean to stand in front of your master? Is it a way of standing? Is it a posture? You just told me this is Aveda Shebalev. This is an emotional thing. So what does that mean? This emotional state of being like a servant, and a servant who's standing in front of the master. And then also, how are we going to relate this to children? Because it sounds scary, and it sounds very demanding, and it sounds very lofty. Okay, all of these concerns, I'm just putting them out on the table, because if you're not saying it, you're thinking it. Man wird eus mitzias vor sich. Man ist verbunden in ganzen mit dem Eibishten. You know what it means to be like a servant before your master? It means to be eus mitzias vor sich. Not having your own existence. And what does it mean not to have your own existence? To become nothing? No. First you become nothing, but then you become everything, or one with the all. You get the ego, the edging God out. You get that out of the way. And now, once you remove your ego, once you're eus mitzias, then it's verbunden in ganzen mit dem Eibishten. You're totally connected with Hashem. So what are we describing? Avodah is being an Evid. And what's being an Evid? Eus mitzias. And what's eus mitzias? There is no me. There's only my master. To the extent where I become one with Him. Now there's a fancy, lofty word for when we lose ourselves so deeply in Hashem that we can't even tell where we end and He begins, where we're just so lost in the oneness. I mean, the oneness is always there, but even on an emotional level, we're feeling so deeply connected. There's a fancy word for it, but it's a word, if you would say this word, nobody would think it applies to a child, and probably you wouldn't even think it applies to most adults. The fancy word is deveikus. But you wouldn't think that would apply to a child, and probably not even to most adults, because you're talking about deveikus, right? Deveikus. Who has time for deveikus? Who's on a level they could even talk about deveikus? Okay. The Rebbe is describing here b'pashtus, a very, very straightforward. Davening means that you feel there is no me, there's only Hashem. Let's continue. Und tefillah is shaykh afilu by a klein Yiddish kind. Davening, as we just described it, is relevant even to a little Jewish child. Was man lernt dem Eis zu anheben sein Tag mit Sagen Meide Ani, who we teach to start his day by saying Meide Ani. You think Meide Ani is cute? I mean, maybe it's cute too, but Meide Ani, a child's Meide Ani? Child's Meide Ani is the bitul of an Eved before his master, Eis Mitzias, and completely verbunden mit den Eibishten. Nothing less than that. Warum euch Meide Ani? Wenn man dankt und leibt dem Eibishten, umkehren unsere Neshama, even Meide Ani, which maybe we as adults, we became jaded. Even this Meide Ani, where you thank and praise Hashem for giving back your soul, is an inyan von tefillah. That's davening. Real davening, like we just described davening. Weil davening häupt sich an mit Sagen Shivchei Shel Makim. Davening starts with praising Hashem, Leib von Eibishten, und danach sagt man Birkas HaShachar und so weiter. And then from Meide Ani you go and you say the morning blessings, bis Tfilas Shemina Esrei, and you daven Shachris, and you daven Shemina Esrei and Shachris. Kommt eis, as afilu a klein Yiddish kind, darf man mechanech sein sich zu verbinden mit den Eibishten. Comes out, bottom line, that even a little Jewish child, you have to teach them to connect to Hashem. And you hear what the Rebbe is describing. Not saying the words of tefillah, not an action, although hamaisa hu ha'ikar, and we hear it all the time, and of course that's one of the yasaydis of Tanya, fake it till you make it, and just do the next right thing, and all of that is true. But at the same time, right now what we're talking about is the emotional component of Avodah Shebalev. Actually feeling there is no me, it's all Him. And the Rebbe is saying, don't sell the little children short. Their Meide Ani and their Birkas HaShachar and their Shachris can and with the proper guidance will be on the level of actually emotionally entering that state of losing their own sense of separate selfhood. And all this lofty stuff that we think only applies to Bali Madrega. And the Rebbe is saying, no, this emotional state is something that's attainable by children. We have to know that it's possible for them. Otherwise, how will they even attain it if we don't realize that it's attainable? As we as the mechanchim, as parents, as educators. Okay, let's continue here. Ad der Inyan, as die Hauptsach von Davening is die deveikus in Eibishten. This concept, in case you weren't sure what the bottom line, what we said so far is, that Rebbe repeats it here, this idea that davening is deveikus. Deveikus, the Rebbe uses the word deveikus. That davening is deveikus. Okay, again, it's not about just looking in the siddur and saying all the words so you can get a raffle ticket. Not to be shoylel, it's that too. But the Rebbe is talking about actual emotional aveda shebalev, feeling, and not just a feeling, the loftiest feeling that a human being can feel, which is being bound up with infinity. Bound up with infinity. Again, we would think adults don't even do this, and only very, very special adults. And the Rebbe is saying, no, children do this too. So this idea of deveikus, that a child is able to have deveikus in Hashem, wird euch untergestrochen in Tefillah Shemona Esrei, is underscored, emphasized in the main prayer of davening, which is Shemona Esrei, which we sometimes call the Amida. Die Takona von Tfilas Ho-Amida is an Anfang gewesen zu sagen 18 Brachas, was der Pfarrer wird die Tefillah angerufen Shemona Esrei. Originally, Shemona Esrei was, like its name is, 18. It was 18 blessings. Und erst später haben Chachmei Yisrael zugegeben noch a bracha, and then later on, historically, there was the sages added another bracha. Which one? Die bracha von Malshinim gegen Apikorsim und das Gleichen. The bracha against the heretics. Und der Rambam erklärt dem Tam of that. And the Rambam, in Mishnah Torah, explains the reason why this bracha was introduced. In der Zeit von Rabban Gamliel seien gewesen Asach Apikorsim zwischen Jiden, welche haben geprüft, einreden Jiden, l'shuv ma'achrei Hashem, zu abkehren sich von Gott. In the times of Rabban Gamliel, there were a lot of heretics who were trying to entice Jews to go away from Hashem. Wie bald men hat gesehen, azug deile mekol tzorchei b'nei Adam. Since we saw that this need to keep Jews from, God forbid, being pulled away from Hashem, this is as important as any material needs, as any other needs that a human being has. You know, davening is about our needs, right? About healing and about parnasa, material needs. But the need to keep Jews connected to Hashem is just as important as any other need. Das ist größer von alle andere menschliche by definition. In fact, it is greater than all other needs. Hat man Mesaken gewend die Bracha von Malshinim, so we instituted the bracha against the heretics. Big chiddush here. Without going too far afield, there's you ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So Abraham Maslow was a Jewish psychologist, lived in California, and he had that triangle, that pyramid, shows the hierarchy of needs. It's a fairly well-known model in psychology. A lot of people are familiar with it. And basically he has this pyramid where he shows a hierarchy. A hierarchy means first this, then this. So at the very bottom are physiological needs. So, first of all, there's the more immediate things, like a person needs to be able to eat, okay? So a person who's starving isn't necessarily thinking about the fact that he's homeless, because eating is a more immediate need than shelter. But then once he has what to eat, then he's concerned about shelter. But if a person, let's say he has what to eat, but he doesn't have shelter, then he's not worrying about things like, do I have friends? Having friends is important. Right? Having friends is very important. But first, I need more basic needs. So then let's say he has food and he has shelter and he has friends. Then he can start worrying about even higher needs, which ultimately, the very spitz of Maslow's hierarchy, at the very tip top of the pyramid, he has self-actualization, which means looking for meaning. Things that aren't tangible, things that aren't material, meaning. The intangible qualities of life. Like feeling good about how you're spending your time, that you're doing something that has value, has redeeming value, that kind of thing. And basically his view was, if you don't have your material needs in place, you're not going to worry about having a meaningful life. It's interesting, at the exact same time as Maslow, there was another Jewish psychologist, but back in the old country, Viktor Frankl, in Austria, and he actually was sent to Auschwitz. And a lot of people think that he wrote logotherapy after his Auschwitz experience. He actually wrote it before, and then he had it verified for him when he was in the concentration camp. His theory was that meaning is as important to life as physical needs. And the Rebbe, by the way, very much favored, of all the secular psychological models, the Rebbe favored Frankel's approach more than the others. In fact, there's a letter where the Rebbe specifically mentions that it's a shame that Freud became the gold standard because he's got a lot of issues, and that Frankel is so much better. But the Rebbe says, I understand why the therapists don't like Frankel, because he demands from you. He demands Haveda, right? So Freud, everybody's sick and everyone's, but Frankel is demanding Haveda, right? Because he says you have to have meaning. You have to have meaning. So I'll tell you a quick story, by the way. Shmuel Lu told me that one time he was talking to Mendel Futterfass. Mendel Futterfass was in London, and so Mendel Futterfass told Shmuel Lu, I don't remember the context how it came up, but he told him a story that when he was in the Gulag, there was a professor there with him. And I don't know what he was a professor of what, and this was, Mendel came out in the 60s, I believe, so I don't know if Man's Search for Meaning by Frankel was behind the Iron Curtain. I don't know if this professor had read logotherapy. I don't know if there'd be ever a way of finding out. But this professor said to Reb Mendel, he says, I notice that a lot of these guys here are healthy young men and they die. Like one morning we're supposed to go to work and they don't get up off the cot. And then we come back from a day of slave labor and they're dead in their cot. And I see you're alive. You're alive. And these guys are dying and you're living, and I don't get the difference between you. So Reb Mendel says to this professor, he says, well, these guys you see dying, they're Cossacks. And a Cossack is a lowlife. You know what a Cossack is? For him, life is three things: a horse, a rifle, and a bottle of vodka. And when he gets sent to this place, he doesn't have those three things. He doesn't have his horse, he doesn't have his rifle, and he doesn't have his bottle of vodka. But those things are life. So when those things are taken away, life itself was taken away. It's only a matter of time. It's an inevitability that his body is going to get the memo from his mind that you're dead already, so there's no reason to get up off the cot, and that's the day that they die. He says, but me, what's life? Life is you try to serve Hashem as best you can. Well, they didn't take that away from me when I came here. Back home, I tried my best to serve Hashem. Over here, I tried my best to serve Hashem. Like, Lamashal, back at home, I'm sitting in my office. I was making the fake passports to get Yidden out of Rusland. And I see it's time to daven mincha. Sun is setting after daven mincha. Okay, so same thing here. We're working, slave labor, we're chopping wood, and the sun is setting after daven mincha. Now, there's no shul to go to. Okay, so I don't go to shul. And I can't actually stop and daven, or they'll shoot me in the head. But while I'm chopping wood, I daven, silently to myself. And in fact, I think to myself, how much more worth my davening, my mincha, is here than back home, because in all the years since Hashem created the world, I bet you nobody ever stood and said his praises on this exact spot. So you see, what did they take from me by sending me here? The point is that the need to be connected to Hashem is as legitimate a need and basic a need and essential a need to human survival and health as any material things. So therefore, in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei, where we're davening for many things that are very material, we added this bracha. Why? Because the need to make sure that our connection to Hashem is intact and preserved is as important as any need, and in fact, more important, right? Isn't that what the Rebbe said? Das ist größer von alle anderen menschliche Bedürfnissen. Connection to Hashem is the most important of all human needs. So listen to this chiddush that Rebbe is saying. That a child needs a connection to Hashem as much as a child needs food to eat, as much as a child needs air to breathe. So you want to talk about ois mitzias. You want to talk about that feeling of losing yourself in Hashem? The Rebbe is describing that a child is able to daven with this awareness that I need my relationship with Hashem like I need food, like I need clothing, like I need shelter. Let's continue. Zetman derfun. As the größte Neut von a Yidden is, the greatest need of a Jew, soll sein verbunden mit dem Eibishten, is connection with Hashem. Und der Rebbe, therefore, wenn die Chachme Yisrael haben gesehen, as es felt in dem Inyan, when the sages saw that there was an issue with this, haben sie hereingestellt a spezielle Tefillah auf them. They added a special prayer just for that, to address that need, which is as important, if not more important, than all other human needs. Und das ist euch der Tam, für was die erste Mitzvah, was wird gebracht in Rambam is Leidish Yesha Matzrishain. And that's also the reason the first mitzvah that the Rambam mentions is, you got to know that Hashem exists. So wissen, als der Eibishter is der Bescheffer von alle Bescheffenischen. To know Hashem is the creator of all creations, that's the first thing. Was durch dem wird man dovuk in Eibishten. And through that you become connected, verbunden, dovuk, one thing, together with Hashem. So, in other words, there's a chiddush here. The Rebbe is saying, why is that the first mitzvah in the Rambam? Well, maybe because, it's not the first mitzvah that appears in Chumash, and why is it the first mitzvah? You know what the Rebbe is saying here? At least from one perspective, it's the first mitzvah because it's the first priority. It's the most important thing. It's the most, as far as needs. We need this. This is the foundation of everything else. This is the most vital, most essential. So you understand what the Rebbe is describing? The Rebbe is describing that a child is able to feel that his relationship with Hashem is vital. He can't live without it. You're thinking this is for adults, only for very special adults. Maybe out of a special adult on a special day. And the Rebbe is saying, no, this is chinuch. This is chinuch for every child. Die Chazal sagen, Eved Melech Melech. Wow, okay, now let's keep going. Another chiddush. The sages say that the servant of the king is the king. For all intents and purposes, the king's servant is like the king. He stands, he has no metzias for himself. So when the Eved shows up and he asks a citizen for something, the citizen understands it's not the Eved asking for it, it's the king asking. And so the citizen responds as if he were responding to the king, right? Der Knecht von a König is wie der König allein. Kommt es, als wenn Jid davint und steht vor den Eibishten wie ein Eved. So when a Jew stands in front of Hashem like a slave, not a dirty word anymore, is it? Is das allein git in Emmerein a Starkheit wie die Starkheit von einem Melech. Doesn't sound so nebuch, an Eved, right? Doesn't sound so unbecoming anymore. You know what an Eved of a Melech is? Is a Melech. The Starkheit von einem Melech. Und bemele, wenn es kommt zu dienen dem Eibishten, bemeshach dem ganzen Tag, so then when it comes to serving Hashem for the rest of the day, since you started the day like an Eved, now subsequently throughout the rest of the day, führt sich leit dem Ratzen von Eibishten, he's able to conduct himself according to Hashem's will. Because he has the strength, the Starkheit von einem Melech. Und wird nicht erwirkt von dem, was tut sich herum. So first is, he's not influenced by his environment. Verkehrt, and to the contrary, führt sich auf wie ein Melech. He acts like a king. Noch sein dik in Golus, although he may still be in Golus, yeah? Was keiner is nicht kein Balabos of him. But even in Golus, there are no authorities over him because he is the king's servant. Therefore, for all intents and purposes, he's a king. There's no authority over him in the world. Olamashal, for example, wenn es kommt zu Chinuch von Kinder, ist wissendig, als sein Kind ist b'nai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu dem Eibishten sein Kind. So now that Rebbe is speaking to the adults. For instance, when you're educating your child, or someone else's child, but you're educating a Jewish child, and you realize this is not my child, this is Hashem's child. Und a Pakoden, was der Eibishter hat gegeben, die Eltern, Hashem loaned you his child, parents. Zit dem Kind, wie es darf zu sein. Then you're going to raise the child the way you need to raise a child, because it's not your child to make mistakes with. This is Hashem's child. Hashem asked you, raise my child for me. In dem Weg von Yiddishkeit und wird nicht spoil von dem Sviva. So what does that mean? In practicality, you're going to raise a strong child who is not influenced by his environment. Because you're educating the prince, the princess, the king's son, the king's daughter. And you're going to teach them who their father is. And you're going to teach them, therefore, what kind of a presence, what kind of dignity, royal bearing they need to have. V'yirotzei, as durch dem, was unser Avedes hat Tfila und bitul zum Eibishtens Rotzin, wollen sein Beschleimas. So may it be Hashem's will through this that our davening, the real davening, the way that Rebbe described it before, which is bitul zum Eibishten, losing the self and connecting to the king, to the extent where you become one with the king. You are the king. So through our davening properly, children and adults, but losing yourself in Hashem until you and the king are one and you are like the king. Soll man sicher sein und kommen zu der Erfüllung von Iker Ratzin, Iker Kol Brachas, die Bracha von es Tzemach David Avdach Meheres Atzmir Chulo, Kil Shuascha Kivina Kol Hayem. This should bring us to the fulfillment of what it says also in Shemoneh Esrei, that the descendant of David, your servant, should quickly sprout forth, and we wait for your salvation all day. Weil der Eibishter ist sicher mekayim die Tfilas von Kol Yisrael und die Bederfenischen von Kol Yisrael. Hashem certainly takes care of the needs of the Jewish people, and this is a need, not just a need, the most basic need, as we explained. Und heubendig davon, was noch seindig in Zman Agolis hat men bani chaim zeine reviche, and starting off even before the fulfillment of the promise of Geula, even while we're still, unfortunately, in the last moments of Golis, the Eibishter will take care of us with children and sustenance and with health in an ample way. Bis der Eibishter is mekayim die bekosha von dem tzedek hachi ikri, and then Hashem will fulfill the most important need that we have, was is gedelim ekol tzarech b'nei adam, the most important need, the most important human need, der hepech von l'shuv machrei Hashem, the opposite of what the Apikorsim in the time of Ram Gamliel were trying to do to Yidden. Yedias Hashem in their fullest shleimus, knowing Hashem in the fullest way. And what does it mean to know Hashem in the fullest way? We said that the Rambam starts with knowing Hashem. That's the mitzvah, the first thing, because the first need a human being has is to know Hashem. But as much as we know Hashem now, it's not complete. When are we going to really, completely, fully know Hashem? Only when? V'yasvet nizgala v'en lasid lave. In the future, the imminent, very, very near future, when it's Mala Ha'aretz Deyas Hashem. Now it's the end of the Rambam. By the way, we went from the beginning of the Rambam to the end of the Rambam. So a whole Hadran and Rambam here and a little Sikha to children. Mala Ha'aretz Deyas Hashem Kamaim Liyam Mechasim. The knowledge of Hashem will cover the world like the water covers the ocean bed. And then we will have our most basic need fulfilled in the fullest way. Our most basic need of knowing Hashem, connecting to Hashem, realizing that our entire existence as Hashem, and again also that metaphor of the water covering the ocean bed, that when you're a fish and you live in the water, every Jew is compared to a fish, like Rebbe Eikev said, you realize water isn't just a thing, water is everything, and that we are in Hashem, and we are dependent on Hashem, and the more we get the ego out of the way, the more we are one with Hashem, and that this is not, this is the bottom line, this is not a lofty concept for Bali Aveda and Bali Madrega. This is basic Judaism for children. Basic Judaism for children, and this is the way that we have to educate the children of the King.
Rabbi Shei's Tau does it again. Rabbi 11, that's correct.